The scream tore through the night like shattered glass, and Emma felt her heart slam against her chest, as though the world had cracked wide open. Emma, a 28-year-old woman with auburn hair and tired eyes, stumbled backward in the empty street, her breath fogging in the cold air. "Why now?" she whispered, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. The sound still echoed through her bones, pulling shadows from places she thought long buried. She had spent years pretending the pain had dulled, but in that moment the weight of her forgotten wounds came crashing back. Her father's broken promises, her mother's silence, the ridicule she endured at school, all pressed against her like invisible fists. Her vision blurred with tears, but her body trembled with something new, something wild and untamed. "You will not crush me again," she said, her voice breaking but fierce. The wind howled around her, carrying fragments of memory, pieces of herself she had long denied. A passing car's headlights cut across her face, and for the first time, she did not turn away. Instead, she stared straight into the light, her eyes wet yet unyielding. In that fragile defiance a spark was born, small, trembling, but alive. Emma knew that the night had called her out of hiding, and there would be no turning back. Emma woke with her body aching as if the night had left marks beneath her skin. The memory of the scream replayed like a broken record, twisting her stomach with dread. At work the next morning, the fluorescent lights hummed above, casting everything in sterile brightness. She moved quietly through the office, her shoulders slightly hunched, hoping to slip unnoticed between the buzzing conversations. Yet she knew people stared. Emma said, "You will not see me falter," though her voice cracked even inside her mind. She reached her desk, fingers tightening on the chair's edge. A colleague glanced at her and smirked, whispering something under his breath. The words didn't matter. Only the sting did. She lowered her gaze, biting back the heat of anger, and whispered, "Not today." But her heart pounded with the weight of invisibility, the ache of being judged without defense. Every tick of the clock pulled her further into the quiet prison of her own restraint, but she forced herself to stay upright, even as doubt gnawed inside. The day dragged on with sharp edges. Emma sat at her computer, the screen a white void where her thoughts refused to form into words. She remembered her mother's voice. "Blend in, Emma, and no one will hurt you." The phrase clung to her like a chain, tightening with each keystroke. Her colleague James approached, tossing papers onto her desk with a sigh. James, 35, tall, lean, his tone biting, muttered, "Try not to mess this up." Emma smiled faintly, a fragile shield, but her insides twisted. She said softly, "I'll handle it." Yet, the silence after her words mocked her, as though even her own voice doubted her worth. Her hands trembled as she typed, each letter a battle against the tremor of doubt. The office noise, phones ringing, chatter rising, blurred into a hollow roar. Emma exhaled sharply, whispering, "Not broken, not yet." She pressed forward, though the weight of their expectations pressed down like stone. The afternoon sun bled pale through the office blinds as Emma leaned back, her eyes burning from the screen's glow. She thought of the night before, the scream, the headlights, the defiance trembling inside her. It seemed so far away, now buried beneath fluorescent monotony. Her colleague Sarah, 31, short brown hair, sharp eyes, leaned against her cubicle. "You look wrecked," Sarah said, her tone half sarcasm, half concern. Emma forced a smile and replied, "Just tired." Sarah's gaze lingered, as if she could see the cracks Emma tried to hide. "You can't keep doing this," Sarah muttered, tapping the desk before walking away. Emma's throat tightened, her voice caught, but no words came. The hum of printers and chatter filled the silence she left behind. Emma whispered to herself, "One more day, just one more." She pressed her palms flat on the desk, grounding herself against the fear of collapsing under invisible weight. When the clock struck 5, the exodus began. Chairs scraped, chatter shifted to weekend plans, and Emma slipped silently into the current. She kept her gaze low, clutching her worn leather bag, her body aching for escape. Outside, the evening sky hung heavy with gray, clouds bruised with the promise of rain. The city buzzed with traffic, horns, and hurried footsteps. Emma paused on the sidewalk, the noise crashing against her like a storm. She thought of her father's voice saying, "Stand tall, or the world will step on you." Her body stiffened at the memory, but she whispered back, "Not anymore." A gust of wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust. She lifted her chin, eyes locking on the horizon. For the first time that day, her breath steadied. The city's chaos did not swallow her whole. It fueled the faint ember of defiance still alive from the night before. Emma sat on her bed, staring at the worn wallpaper, her fingers tracing faint cracks like they were lines etched into her skin. The night's scream lingered, but now it blended with old echoes. Her father shouting, her mother turning away, the cruel laughter of classmates. The burden of her past pressed down, heavier than the silence in the room. She whispered, "You tried to bury me, but I'm still here." The mirror across the room reflected a tired woman who looked older than her years, yet the fire in her eyes flickered faintly. Memories rushed forward, birthdays forgotten, victories dismissed, and countless nights of loneliness. Emma hugged her knees tightly, whispering, "I will not vanish again." Though the room was dim, the faint glow of dawn crept through the curtains, casting fragile lines of light across her face. She inhaled deeply, fighting the familiar ache, and promised herself that she would not let the past dictate her tomorrow. At breakfast, the silence was suffocating. Emma sat across from her mother, Margaret, a 55-year-old woman with graying hair pulled into a bun and sharp eyes that rarely softened. The clinking of spoons on porcelain echoed louder than words. Margaret finally said, "You should stop chasing shadows, Emma." The words landed heavy, dismissive. Emma forced a faint smile and replied, "I'm not chasing. I'm trying to live." Her mother's gaze narrowed, lips pressing into a thin line. Memories of years spent overlooked filled Emma's chest with a bitter ache. She wanted to scream, to demand recognition, but her voice trembled instead. She whispered, "I just need you to see me." Margaret didn't respond, her silence harsher than any insult. Emma dropped her eyes to the table, gripping her mug tightly. The steam rising felt like the last fragile shield she could cling to, as though it could hide the pain of being unseen. The office was buzzing with idle chatter when Emma walked in, but to her it felt like a cage echoing with judgment. She kept her head down, clutching her folder, but she knew whispers trailed behind her. James leaned near the copy machine, his smirk sharp. "Late again," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. Heat flushed Emma's cheeks, but she forced herself to reply, "I'm here now, and I'll finish my work." His eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. "We'll see," he said, turning away. Her heart thundered in her chest as the words clung to her like shackles. She moved to her desk, exhaling sharply, whispering to herself, "Do not break." Each click of her keyboard sounded like defiance against the weight pressing down on her. Though the room roared with noise, Emma's focus narrowed into a fragile tunnel where survival meant simply refusing to fold. By afternoon, Sarah appeared again, leaning against Emma's cubicle wall with folded arms. Her sharp eyes caught every detail. "You can't keep shrinking like this," she said, her voice edged with sarcasm but layered with truth. Emma shook her head, whispering, "It's not that simple." Sarah leaned closer, lowering her tone. "It never is. But if you keep hiding, they'll bury you alive." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight with unspoken fears. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "I'm not ready," Emma admitted softly. Sarah's eyes softened, though her expression stayed guarded. "You'll never feel ready. You just do it." She tapped the desk once and walked away, leaving Emma staring at her trembling hands. The weight of Sarah's words echoed in her chest, colliding with memories of silence and shame. For the first time, Emma wondered if she had been the one holding the cage shut all along. As evening settled, Emma sat alone at a corner cafe, the hum of espresso machines masking her thoughts. The rain tapped gently against the window, blurring the city lights into smears of gold and blue. She stirred her coffee absently, her reflection faint in the glass. "Am I enough?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clatter of cups. The question had haunted her for years, woven into every dismissal, every sidelong glance. She remembered Sarah's words. Hard, blunt, but necessary. Somewhere in their sharpness lay a strange comfort. Emma exhaled, feeling the storm within her chest slowly calm. She pressed her palm against the cool window pane, watching raindrops slide down like trails of forgotten tears. Her lips curved slightly, fragile but real, as she whispered, "I won't disappear." Though the cafe bustled around her, Emma sat in a quiet cocoon, the first spark of belief flickering gently in her heart. The office grew tense when Emma discovered her work presentation had been tampered with. Files she had carefully prepared were missing slides, numbers replaced with errors. Her chest tightened as whispers spread like wildfire. James leaned against a desk, his smirk sharp as ever. "Looks like you're slipping," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Emma's hands shook as she clutched her laptop, whispering to herself, "Not me, someone change this." Panic clawed at her throat, but she refused to crumble. She stood straighter, her voice steady though thin. "I'll fix it before the meeting." James chuckled. "If you can." Heat burned her cheeks, shame and fury twisting together. She sat at her desk, typing with frantic precision, knowing every second mattered. The betrayal was clear, but so was her resolve. For once, she would not vanish. "I will finish this," she muttered, her eyes blazing with determination. The meeting room felt like a courtroom. Emma stood before the projector, the room filled with colleagues whispering under their breath. Her palms were damp, heart pounding, but she forced her voice to steady. She presented her work with clarity, rebuilding the missing details live. Margaret's voice from memory haunted her. "Stay quiet, don't embarrass us." But Emma silenced it. Sarah caught her gaze from across the room, nodding once, sharp and supportive. Emma's chest lifted as she pressed on, each sentence a rebellion against fear. The numbers she typed into the projection matched perfectly, proving her accuracy. Yet James muttered audibly, "Lucky guess." The remark cut deep, but Emma ignored him, focusing on the nods of approval around the table. For the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in her colleague's eyes. Her voice faltered once, but she caught it, whispering to herself, "Stand tall." After the meeting, Emma stepped into the hallway, her legs trembling from the weight of the confrontation. The echoes of laughter and whispers trailed behind her, but Sarah followed, her voice blunt. "You did better than you think." Emma shook her head, whispering, "They still doubt me." Sarah crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. "Let them. Doubt doesn't erase truth." Emma met her gaze, the words sinking deeper than she wanted to admit. She whispered, "What if I'm not enough?" Sarah's expression softened slightly, though her tone stayed firm. "You are. You just don't believe it yet." Emma inhaled shakily, feeling both exposed and steadied. For a fleeting moment, the loneliness she carried felt less suffocating. Sarah gave a final nod before walking away, leaving Emma pressed against the cool wall, whispering. That evening, Emma returned home exhausted. The apartment was dim, shadows pooling in corners, the hum of traffic seeping through thin walls. She sat at the small kitchen table, flipping open her notebook filled with half-written plans and abandoned dreams. "All the times I stayed silent, all the moments I let slip," she whispered. Her pen hovered before she began scribbling fiercely, as though each word could fight back against years of erasure. She wrote, "I will not disappear," over and over until the ink smudged. Her hand cramped, but her chest eased slightly. For once, she poured her rage and fear onto the page, unfiltered. A single tear fell, darkening the paper, but she did not stop. She whispered again, firmer this time, "I will not disappear." The apartment felt less like a prison, more like a witness to her vow. Later that night, Emma stood by her window, the city alive with neon and rushing cars below. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, the rain streaking down like mirrored tears. Her reflection stared back, worn, tired, but burning with something fierce. She whispered, "You can doubt me, you can break me, but I will rise." Her voice was stronger than she expected, vibrating through the quiet room. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her, but for the first time she welcomed it. Thunder cracked in the distance, and Emma did not flinch. Instead, she let the lightning illuminate her face, sharp and unyielding. The fear had not vanished, but it no longer ruled her. Her whisper turned into a steady promise, "I will rise." The morning felt different, though Emma couldn't explain why. She walked into the office with her shoulders straighter, her steps deliberate. James sneered as usual, muttering something under his breath, but this time she didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye and said, "Your words don't define me." His smirk faltered, just slightly, before he turned away. The change was small, but Emma felt it ripple through her chest like a quiet victory. She sat at her desk, opening her laptop, her hands steady for once. The fear hadn't vanished, but she felt its grip loosening. She whispered, "Not invisible, not anymore." As the hum of the office surrounded her, Emma realized she was learning to breathe through the weight instead of being crushed by it. It wasn't triumph, not yet, but it was strength, raw and fragile, rising slowly within her. By midday, Sarah appeared at Emma's desk again, arms crossed, sharp eyes studying her. "Something's different," Sarah said. Emma smiled faintly, whispering, "I stopped listening." Sarah raised an eyebrow, amused. "About time." Emma laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. For years, laughter had felt like a foreign language, but now it slipped out naturally, lightening her chest. Sarah leaned closer, muttering, "Hold on to that." Emma nodded, feeling the truth in her words. For the first time, she wasn't shrinking under scrutiny. She was standing, however unsteady. As Sarah walked away, Emma whispered, "I can do this." The words tasted unfamiliar but powerful. That evening, Emma joined a team meeting she usually avoided. The room buzzed with overlapping conversations, but she raised her voice when the discussion stalled. "We should try another approach," she said firmly. Silence fell for a moment, eyes turning toward her. Her chest tightened, but she kept going, outlining her idea clearly. To her surprise, several heads nodded. Even the manager, a man who rarely acknowledged her, leaned forward and said, "That could work." Heat rushed to her cheeks, but this time it wasn't shame, it was pride. Emma whispered to herself, "They heard me." The validation was small, but it felt monumental, like cracks opening in walls she thought unbreakable. Later that night, Emma returned to her apartment, her notebook still open on the table. She reread the words she had scrawled in anger. "I will not disappear." And for once they didn't feel like a desperate plea. They felt like a promise. She traced the ink with her fingertip, smiling softly. The loneliness was still there, but it no longer consumed her. She said aloud, "I believe you," as if speaking to the version of herself who had written those words. Her reflection in the window met her gaze, not broken, but slowly mending. The quiet felt less like suffocation and more like peace. The next morning, Emma stood outside on the crowded sidewalk, the city alive with its usual chaos. But today, she didn't shrink back. She lifted her chin, letting the noise surround her without drowning her spirit. A gust of wind lifted her auburn hair, and she smiled faintly at the sky. "You don't control me anymore," she whispered, the words directed at every shadow that had ever silenced her. People passed by without noticing, but for Emma, it was enough. She felt her chest expand, her breath steady, and for the first time the world didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a place she could belong. Emma scrolled through her inbox late at night, her eyes heavy, when a misdirected email appeared. It was a project log, showing James had edited her slides the night before the meeting. Her chest tightened, breath caught in her throat. "It was him," she whispered, fingers trembling over the mouse. She printed the document, staring at the lines of digital betrayal. Every correction was deliberate, every error planted. The betrayal she had suspected now screamed in black and white. Anger surged, raw and unfiltered, but beneath it a strange calm emerged. She whispered, "I am not crazy. I was never incompetent." Her heart pounded, yet her hands steadied as she slid the papers into her folder. She knew the truth now, and there was no going back. The next morning, Emma cornered Sarah in the break room, her voice low but urgent. "I know James sabotaged me," she said, holding out the email printout. Sarah's sharp eyes flicked over the page before she nodded. "I saw him at your desk that night. I didn't say anything because I wanted you to fight back, not run." Emma's stomach twisted, unsure if it was gratitude or anger. "You knew?" she asked, voice cracking. Sarah crossed her arms, tone blunt. "I knew you had the strength. Now you have proof." Emma's breath steadied, anger fusing into resolve. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like someone ready to confront the truth. Later that day, Emma sat in Ira's office, her folder on the table. The manager opened an archived email Emma had never seen. It showed her name listed as the original project lead months ago. James had replied to the thread with a single word: handled. Emma's body went cold, her breath sharp. Years of silence, years of doubt, and here was proof she had been stolen from. Hart muttered, "This is serious." Emma whispered, "He harassed me." The truth burned, bitter but freeing. She wasn't weak. She wasn't incompetent. She had been buried. And now, the soil was cracking. That evening, Emma called her mother. The line crackled, silence stretching before Margaret's voice came. "Why are you digging into this?" Emma's throat tightened. "Because I was erased." Margaret sighed, weary. "I told you not to chase too high. You'd only get hurt." Emma's chest ached, the years of discouragement crystallizing. "You thought you were protecting me," Emma whispered. "But you were burying me." The silence that followed was heavy, a lifetime of unspoken truths sitting between them. Margaret said softly, almost broken, "I didn't think you were strong enough." Emma's voice steadied, sharp with resolve. "I am." Emma stood at her window, city lights shimmering through the night haze. The folder of proof lay on her desk, waiting. Her reflection in the glass no longer looked like a shadow. She whispered, "They tried to silence me, but I will be heard." The rain outside eased, leaving a clean silence. Emma pressed her palm against the glass, her breath steady. "Tomorrow I fight," she said, her words firm, unshaken. For the first time, her voice didn't sound like a whisper to herself. It sounded like a declaration to the world. The conference room was silent, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. Emma stood at the head of the table, folder in hand, heart pounding but voice steady. She placed the proof on the table, the printed emails sharp against the polished wood. "This was sabotage," she said, her tone firm. James shifted in his chair, smirk gone, eyes narrowing. The manager leaned forward, scanning the documents, his brow furrowed. Emma continued, "My work was stolen, my voice erased, but not anymore." Every eye was on her, the room electric with tension. James muttered, "She's exaggerating," but his words fell flat against the evidence. Emma's chest rose as she whispered to herself, "This is my fight." The silence stretched, thick, before the manager finally said, "This changes everything." James stood suddenly, his voice sharp, "She's lying. She always has excuses." Emma's pulse thundered, but she did not flinch. She raised her chin, eyes locked on him. "You erased me. You sabotaged my work and you thought no one would notice." Gasps rippled around the table. Sarah, seated near the corner, leaned forward, voice cutting through the noise. "I saw him at her desk. She isn't lying." James froze, his face twisting with anger. The room erupted in whispers, the tide shifting. Emma's breath steadied, her words no longer whispers but commands. "This ends now." For the first time, she was not the one shrinking, James was. The manager lifted a hand, silencing the room. "The evidence is clear," he said slowly, eyes fixed on James. "You manipulated her work." James stammered, but the authority in the manager's tone silenced him. Emma's hands trembled at her sides, not with fear but with release. Years of being doubted collapsed under the weight of truth. She exhaled deeply, whispering, "You can't erase me anymore." Sarah's eyes met hers, and for the first time there was no cynicism, only respect. Emma stood taller, her chest steady, as the manager turned to her. "You've proven your resilience, Emma. This is your project again." The words hit her like sunlight breaking storm clouds. When the meeting ended, Emma walked out, her legs shaky but her spirit unbroken. The hallway seemed brighter, every step echoing louder than the whispers of doubt she had once carried. Sarah caught up with her, muttering, "I told you, you were stronger than you believed." Emma smiled faintly, replying, "Maybe I just needed someone to remind me." The two walked side by side, silence heavy but no longer suffocating. Emma realized this was no longer about James or her mother's doubts. It was about reclaiming the voice she had buried for too long. She whispered, "I am enough," the words soft yet ringing like a vow. That night, Emma stood on the rooftop of her building, the city sprawling beneath her in shimmering lights. The wind tugged at her hair, cool against her flushed cheeks. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of traffic and distant sirens fade into a steady hum. She whispered, "I fought, and I won." Her reflection in the glass door behind her showed a woman transformed, not invisible, not erased, but unshaken. The scars of her past were still there, but now they glowed like proof of survival. She opened her eyes to the skyline, whispering, "Tomorrow begins here." For the first time in her life, Emma didn't fear the future. She welcomed it. The next morning, Emma walked into the office not as a shadow, but as someone seen. The air felt lighter, though the stares of her colleagues still followed her. For once they didn't sting. They fueled her stride. She placed her bag on her desk with calm precision, meeting every gaze with steady eyes. Whispers rose, but this time, silence did not cage her. She whispered to herself, "They see me now." James sat hunched at his desk, his smirk gone, his eyes avoiding hers. Emma breathed deeply, shoulders lifted, and began her work. It wasn't victory over him that mattered, it was victory over her silence. At lunch, Sarah sat across from Emma, arms folded but eyes softer than before. "You've changed," she said simply. Emma smiled faintly, replying, "I just remembered who I was." Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. "No, you became who you were always meant to be." The words struck Emma deeply, filling her with a warmth she had long forgotten. She whispered, "Thank you for not letting me disappear." Sarah smirked. "Don't thank me, thank yourself." Emma's chest lifted, the weight of years loosening, her laughter soft but genuine. For the first time her heart felt light. That evening, Emma returned home and opened her notebook again. The pages were filled with scribbled declarations, smudges of ink from nights of anger and despair. She added new words, her handwriting firm. "I am enough. I am not invisible." She read the page aloud, her voice steady, filling the small room. It echoed like truth, bouncing off the walls that had once felt like prison bars. She placed the pen down and smiled at the reflection in her window. The woman staring back was no longer the same. She whispered, "You survived. You rose." Later, Emma called her mother again. The line crackled, but this time she spoke first. "Mom, I need you to hear me." Silence stretched before Margaret replied, weary, "I didn't think you were strong enough." Emma's voice did not falter. "I am. I always was. I just forgot." On the other end, Margaret whispered, "I was wrong." Emma closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, but they were no longer heavy with shame, they were release. "I forgive you," Emma said softly, her voice carrying years of unspoken pain turned into freedom. On the rooftop once more, Emma stood tall against the skyline. The wind carried the city's hum, neon lights glowing in the distance. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply before speaking aloud. "I found myself." The words cut through the night, simple yet monumental. Her reflection in the glass door shimmered faintly, showing a woman no longer hiding in shadows. She whispered, "From lost to found," her lips curving into a smile. The silence that followed felt infinite, the city breathing with her. Emma stepped forward, her silhouette framed by the horizon. The world had not changed, but she had, and that made all the difference.